All right, hello everybody. Lab 7. Let's jump into it here. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I have my VM up here and my browser open to the lab instruction page. Let's just go through this. We're going to focus on step 4. And there are several things we need to talk about on step 4. Okay, so let's start at the beginning here and just see if there's anything noteworthy to comment about in the beginning. Okay. All right. So we have step 1 here. Insert 2 new rows into the common lookup table to support the active flag. Okay, and Brother McLaughlin, he in the video in iLearn how to start Lab 7, he takes you through this and does these inserts with you. Okay, so no problem there, right? You know how to do that. Okay, and then step 2. Insert 3 new rows into the common lookup table to support the price type column in the price table. Okay, so here are the specifications here. You do that just like step 1. All right, and run your validation query, and this is what you'll see. Okay, and then in step 3, you add rental item price column and rental item type column, and then you populate that. You update those columns with values. Okay, and you have your validation query, and these are the results you should see. And then 2 validation queries, actually, okay, because there's a foreign key that you set up in there. And down here at the bottom, he, in the hint for 3A, he gives you the code. All right, so in my announcement, I said disregard this statement about typecasting. Okay, so the following code shows you how to update existing rows with the proper values from the common lookup table. And so just run this code, and then here's your validation query to do step 3, okay, to update those values in the rental item table. Okay. And then don't forget 3B here. We're going to, you should be able to do that. We're going to go to step 4 here. All right. In step 4, Brother McLaughlin breaks down kind of the points here with 30 points with 1 select, and a union all 20 points with 2 selects, 10 points with 6 selects. Anyway, we're not going to worry about all that. We're going to do the 30 points, 1 select. That's what we're going to do, okay? And we're going to walk through how to do that. All right. Let's see where he starts here. Okay, hint for step 4. The select list draws data from the current item table. Okay, what are we doing in this in step 4 here? Okay, you need to write a select statement that returns a data set that you can subsequently insert into the price table. Okay, so in Lab 8, that's what we're going to do in Lab 8. We're going to construct a select statement here in Lab 6 and Lab 7, and then in Lab 8, we're going to wrap that select statement in an insert statement. We're going to say insert into the price table, and then we're going to have this select, and this data that gets selected in this select statement will then be inserted into the price table. That's how we're going to populate the price table. Okay, so this week, Lab 7, we're just going to construct the select. That will make Lab 8 easy. Lab 8 will be easy because that then all you have to do is put it inside of an insert and it goes into the price table, okay? So how do we do that? We're going to write a select statement that returns data to insert into the price table. This is a complex problem because you must fabricate rows from a base set of rows, and then you must perform mathematical calculations with a case statement. Okay, so we're dealing with the item table, okay? We are pricing items. All right, so let's go and look at what we have in the item table. So I've run the query to I'm in SQL Plus here, and have run the query to select these columns from the item table and everything in there, okay? So we see that we have 24 items. And here at the bottom, 22, 23, 24, we have Tron, Ender's Game, and Elysium. These should look familiar because these are the new items that you inserted in Lab 6. Okay, now let's look at the release date. We see, you know, the Seed Oracle store, it does the first 21 items. And you see the release dates here are well in the past, okay? But the release dates here on the last three say 24 October 17, because when we run our lab and we inserted a release date for these three items, we used trunk sysdate, right? -1. And so, so today is October 25th, and so the release date for these, I just ran this, is trunk sysdate -1, so it's the 24th of October. Okay, so the important thing is we have 3 new releases and we have 21 old releases. And now we need to put in into the price table prices for these. Now this would be a simple task if there was just one price for each item. And if there was just one price for each item, we would alter the table and add a price column into the item table, and then we would just put a price value in there for each item. But our items don't have just one price. Our items have 6 possible prices, 6 prices, okay? Why do they have 6 prices? So this is our business rules, our business model, okay? So we have 1-day, 3-day, and 5-day rentals. And so the price for a 1-day rental is different than the price for a 3-day rental, is different than a price for a 5-day rental. So there are 3 different prices for the same item, each item, right? So 24 items, each item has 3 prices. And if we're going to have multiple prices, a list of prices, right? We can't put it, the relational model, right? We cannot put lists into a table. We have to have another table. And that is the price table. That's why we have the price table, to contain these lists of prices for all the items. So our price table is very much an item-based table with all the prices that go with the items. Now, we further complicate this by having different prices for old releases versus new releases. Okay, so let's go back to our lab here. Let's go to the results table here at the bottom. And this shows what we want to end up with. Okay? And let me scroll to the bottom here and let's look at our new releases first. Okay? To explain our model here. Okay, so remember that items 22, 23, and 24 are our new items. So here you see them, 22, 23, and 24. And you see 3 lines for 22 because we have a 1-day, a 3-day, and a 5-day rental. And if we come across here, we see that for a 3-day rental, the price is, or a 1-day rental, the price is $3. If it's a 3-day rental, the price is $10. And if it's a 5-day rental, then the price is $15. Okay, so we have that for item 1022, which was Tron, right? And then we have 1023, and it has the same 3 rows: 1-day, 3-day, 5-day rental, $3, $10, and $15. And then item 1024 Elysium has the same thing: 1, 3, 5-day rental, 3, 10, 15. Okay, so easy enough, right? Now what happens in our business is that after 30 days, or on day 31, it's no longer a new release. It becomes an old release. And so then what happens to the price? So let's go up here and look at item 1 to talk about the what happens when there's a new what happens to the price when a new release becomes an old release. Let's go. I'm going to go back to the to that item table again and look at the release date here. Okay, so let's just look at item 1001 here. The Hunt for Red October, and the release date is 2 March of 1990. Okay, I'm going to see if that correlates to our to the date in our price table here. But remember this release date for item 1, Hunt for Red October, 2 March 1990. Okay, back to our price table. we had, so here's item 1. And you see that item 1 now has 6 prices. Okay? Because on March 2nd, item 1 was a new release. And so it had a price, a one-day rental of $3, 3-day $10, 5-day $15. And that price started on the same day as the release, 2 March 1990. Okay? Now, important point. This start date here is the start date of this price line. It's not the release date. Okay? Now, it happens to be the same as the release date, but that's not what start date means here. Start date means the start date for this price line. Very important, okay? So when Hunt for Red October was released, it was a new release. We got it in on 2 March 1990, and the price was $3, $10, and $15 for 1, 3, and 5-day rental. Now, on April 2nd, Hunt for Red October became an old release. Okay, so for 30 days it was a new release, and on day 31 it became an old release. And we lower the price on old releases. Okay, so when a new release comes in, it's a higher price, right? Everybody wants to rent the new release. But after 30 days, on day 31, it becomes an old release and we lower the price. So that's what we've done here. So see, the start date on this line is 2 April 1990. So on 2 April 1990, it became, the Hunt for Red October became an old release, and a 1-day rental price went to $1, and a 3-day rental price went to $3, and a 5-day rental price went to $5. And up here for these first 3 prices, the 3, 10, and 15, we now have an end date. Okay, so this price ended on the 1st of April 1990. These 3 prices ended on the 1st of April 1990. And keep with me here, we look over to the active flag column, and we see that the active flag is N, meaning no longer active, not active. Okay, so this was the price from 2nd of March 1990 until the 1st of April 1990. Then this price ended, and now this is not an active price for this item. Now you might say, why don't we just delete it out, or we just keep the current price? Why do we keep the old prices? Well, we need to know historically what the original price was, and for our record keeping, bookkeeping, somebody comes in at a later date and needs a refund for some reason, and we're going to get into that in a later lab, then we have to have what was the original price. Okay, but now it's not active. Now it's a not active price, and now the start date for the old release price is 2 April 1990. There is no end date because that's still the price. Today, as of today, that price is still valid for a 1-day rental, $1, 3-day $3, 5-day $5. And we look to the left and we see that the active flag is yes. This is the active price for this item. Okay. So how does that work? Somebody comes in to rent Hunt for Red October. They come in today and they say, I want to rent Hunt for Red October and I want to keep it for 5 days. And so we look up in our database and we say, find item 1001, find where the active flag is yes, the current active price, and find 5-day rental, and tell me what that price is, and our database query will come back and tell us $5 for that rental. And we let them check it out and rent Hunt for Red October for 5 days for $5. Okay, so you see how that works. So we have now six prices for each old release. So items 1001 through 1021 have 6 rows of prices. They each have 3 rows for the prices that were valid when it was a new release, and they have 3 rows for the prices that are valid now, that it is an old release. Okay, 6 prices for each item for old releases. And for our new releases, our 3 items that are new releases, they only have 3 prices each, because they've been in less than 30 days. And once they go to day 31, then we'll insert some more lines for those, because then they will be old releases. Okay, it's important that you understand that. If you didn't understand that, replay that, okay, and make sure you understand that. Okay, this table that we are looking at here is the result of the validation. Okay, and this is the result of the select statement. For step 4, the select statement is the validation query, and this is the result that you need to get from your query. Okay. Now, if I told you to go and put this in a spreadsheet, right? Put all these prices in, create a price table spreadsheet, and go and fill it in with the correct start date, end date, and prices. You could do that based on looking at the release date. Okay, based on the release date, you would be able to go in and fill out that spreadsheet, figure out what is the start date for when it was a new release, and then knowing that on day 31 it becomes an old release, and given the item the item release date, you could go in and figure out all of this and enter it into a spreadsheet, right? No problem. So that's what we want Oracle to do for us. In this select statement, we're going to write the code where, based on the release date in the item table, Oracle will calculate the start date, the end date, if applicable, and the amounts and come back with this report. Okay, how do we do that? How do we do that? So let's go back up to our instructions here, and right at the top here, he has this hint for step 4. Okay, take a break if you need to, but focus on what we're doing here, okay, in order to understand how to construct this select statement. So we have our 24 items in the item table. And then we're going to construct values. We're constructing these values to insert into the price table. And we've got 2 things here that we need to consider in constructing those values. We need to consider, is the active flag yes or no? Okay, so two possible values here, yes or no. When it's an old release and in the first 30 days, then the active flag is now no. And then for an old release, starting on day 31, the active flag is yes. And for new releases, the active flag is yes, because they're new releases and they don't have an N, right? We saw that in the result. There's no N for the 3 active new releases. Okay, so we've got an active flag that can be yes or no in that column. And then we have 1 day. Well, we've got these values, but we've got 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day rentals. So I wish this bullet said 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day rental. It says it down here, and so let's focus on this down here. So we've got 24 rows in the item table. We've got an active flag column of yes and no, and a 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day rental. So how many rows do we have, or should we have, in our price table? So we've got 2 conditions here, yes and no when it's an old release, and 3 conditions here. And 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so we're multiplying, right? We're multiplying the number of rows. 3 times 2 is 6. These 2 conditions and these 3 conditions. And so let's look at that one more time, just so you have that firmly in your head here. Okay, so we've got active flag yes and no, and then for each for yes and for no, we have 3 conditions, 1, 3, and 5 day rental. So, and 3 times 2 is 6. So we have 6 rows, 6 prices. Now, if we had, and then we have 24, back up here, we have 24 rows, 24 items. So if we had yes and no for all 24 items, how many rows would we have? We would have 2 times 3 times 24, right? And we would have 144 items, and that's what Brother McLaughlin is showing you in this table down here. Now, So here we are. We've got two conditions, yes and no. We've got 1, 3, and 5-day rentals. And so how many rows do we have? And if every item had a yes and a no, we would have 144 rows in our table. 2 times 3 times 24. But for our new releases, and we've got 3 new releases, then we subtract, we don't have no's. We don't have no's. So for 3 releases, we need to we will subtract, we will not have in the table these three values for no for 3 releases. So 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so when we take out then for new releases that the new releases don't have a no yet, then we get 135 rows. Okay, so we'll have 135 rows in our result table. Okay. Okay. Let's go to our query here, our select. So pause if you need to. We're now going into how does this work. And in our how, we're going to look at 2 things. First, the from clause. The from clause, which are the joins. And that's where Oracle goes first, right? So when we're constructing our select statement, we put tables, right? We go to the from clause and do joins, and Oracle constructs a result table. And then from that result table, we then select columns from that result table here in our select clause. Okay. So note that we start with the item table. Okay, again, that's our base table. And so we are selecting from item, and we give it an alias of I for the item table. And we are doing here a cross join. And what does a cross join do? A cross join multiplies, right? So go back to lab 5 to the instructions on week 5, lesson 5, right? And find that what a cross join does, and look at that, review that to see how a cross join multiplies rows. Okay, so we're doing a cross join. And what are we cross joining on? Now this is an interesting thing that Brother McLaughlin does here to fabricate data. Note that he's using the dual table. What is that? That's a fake table, right? But it will return to us the values that the literal values that we specify, and Oracle will return that as a table, as a virtual table, right? Okay, so select Y as active flag from dual, union all select N as active flag from dual. Okay, and then give that result. So Oracle will go do that, construct a virtual table in memory, and then we say give that result table an alias of AF, okay, for this active flag cross join. Okay, timeout. What did we just do? Let's go look at this, what happens in this dual statement union all, okay? So here's my query that worked once I constructed it correctly. So, well, let's look at this query first, right here, okay? Select Y as active flag from dual. What does that do? It selects the value Y and brings back, here's the value Y. And it labels the column active flag, and this A then stands for active flag here. And it has one value in it, and the value is Y. Select Y as active flag from dual. There we go, okay? And if we did select N as active flag from dual, then it would select an N. And now what we do is, well, let's union those. So if we union those, we do a select Y as active flag from dual, union all, select N as active flag from dual. What do we get? We get one column, an active flag column, with two values, Y and an N, okay? So now we have an active flag column in our virtual table. When we do this cross join, right, we have an active flag column in our virtual table that Oracle has created, and we have a Y and an N, okay? So back to our join here. When Oracle gets done with this first cross join, how many rows are in that virtual table? There are 48 rows, right? Because we have 24 in the item table times 2 in this that came back from our dual union here. And so for each item, so visualize this, right? So for each item in the item table, we have a row that has an active flag column of yes, and a row with an active flag column of no. And so the row repeats. So item 1, 1001, and then we've got active flag column yes, and then we've got row, or item 1001 again, and active flag column N. Okay, 48 rows in our virtual table here. Each item having 2 rows, one row with a Y in the active flag column. We created this active flag column here, and the other with an N in the active flag column. All right. Now we tell Oracle, do another cross join. And now cross join, and we're going to use dual again. We're going to do the same thing. Select 1 as rental days from dual, union all, select 3 as rental days from dual, union all, select 5 as rental days from dual. Okay, and then take that result table in memory and give that an alias of dr. Okay, so Oracle goes and constructs that virtual table in memory, and now how many rows are in this dr virtual table? Well, 24 items times 2 times 3 is 144 rows. And so now we have, let's go down here to our result. So now we have, in memory, Oracle has constructed a table with 6 rows for every item. And this active flag column has been created with N's and Y's in it. And then this rental days column So hold this thought, right? The rental days column has been constructed with 1, 3, and 5-day rentals for each item. And we have now in our virtual table in memory 144 rows. And that is the result of our cross join. Now, what do we do? Well, this 1, 3, and 5-day rental, this really is what we have in our common lookup table, right? We have a price type in our common lookup table. A 1-day, 3-day, 5-day rental price types. And so we don't want to just insert these values 1, 3, 5 into our price table. We want to now get a foreign key. We want to get the price type based on whether it's a 1-day, 3-day, or 5-day rental. Okay? So to do that, we do an inner join, and you've done a lot of these now, right? We're doing an inner join to the common lookup table, and we're joining on. What are we joining on? We're joining on where dr.rentaldays. What is dr.rentaldays? Well, dr is our result table, our 144 rows that are in a virtual table in memory right now, and this row, rental days, where this dr.rentaldays, and what value does it have? 1, 3, or 5 equals something in the common lookup table. Equals something in the common lookup table. Now the code here says substring in common lookup, right? Because CL is the alias for the common lookup table. CL dot common lookup type, and then a 1, 1. So what this command does is it says, go to the common lookup table on this join, go to the common lookup type, and do a substring on the first character. First character. And only the first character, right? So starting at the first character and ending at the first character, and bring that value back where that common lookup type equals a 1, a 3, or a 5. Okay? So let's go and look at our common lookup table here. Let's see. When we've inserted these values, what I have here is the verification query. So let's just select star from common. Let's select common lookup type. From common lookup. And here are all of our common lookup types. Let's select the common lookup ID with the common lookup type. From common lookup. Okay, so here we have, and it looks like this has run, so we have, it's run twice here. So we have, or it's in here twice, we have 1020, common lookup ID 1020, a 1-day rental, common lookup ID 1021 is a 3-day rental, and 1022 is a 5-day rental. And so we see that the first character in that common lookup type is a 1, a 3, or a 5. Okay? And so that's what that substring function is doing. It's looking at the first character of the common lookup type where it's 1, 3, or 5, and matching on those and bringing those back. Okay? And so in Lab 7, your validation query then will come back. Now, the reason it's in there twice is because the first 3 apply to the price table. I didn't select that, and the second 3 apply to the rental item table. Okay, so the first 3 apply to the price table, and that was rows 1020, 1021, 1022 in our common lookup table. Okay, and so we have. So we're doing an inner join matching on 1, 3, 5 in that common lookup type of our common lookup table, and that's everything from that is our from clause. Okay, all of our tables, all of our joins, and then we filter out here. We say where the common lookup table and the common lookup column is price, so that it does not look at the rental item lines, okay, in that last join. Okay, so this where applies to the last join. Okay, so right up to that point, let's go down now to our result table and see how that maps to our result table. And we see that we have price type that inner joined the common lookup table, got our price type, 1 day, 3 day, 5 day rental. And so we're printing out the price type here. And you see it's 1020, 1021, and 1022. Okay, so this is coming from the common lookup table. And this is the foreign key value that points to the common lookup table saying that it's a 1 day rental or a 3 day rental or a 5 day rental. Okay. All right. Now we have, we need to subtract those 9 rows. Okay. We need to subtract those 9 rows for the, let me scroll down again to the bottom, right, for the new releases, because the new releases 1022, 1023, 1024, these items don't have end columns because they're new releases. They only have active flag of yes. They don't have any active flag prices of no yet. We need to subtract those. Okay, so the and not, okay, and not where the it's a new release, right? And not where the active flag is N and it's a new release. Okay, so those 2 conditions will subtract out the right rows. Okay, where the active flag is N in our virtual table, those are sitting in our virtual table. Those N's for these 3. Those are sitting in our virtual table. We have to subtract them out. So we say where, what we say where AF.ActiveFlag and not where AF.ActiveFlag equals N, and it's a new release. We don't want to subtract these ends up here. We only want to subtract the ends where it's a new release. Well, how do we know it's a new release? We know it's a new release if the release date is within 30 days of today, right? Okay, so you don't see the end not written for you here, But verbally, okay, I'm giving you the N naught. N naught AF dot active flag equals N, and the and sys date, today's date, minus the release date is less than 31. Okay? So where, and there are other ways to say that, right? But where today's date minus the release date is less than 30, or you could say where where sys date minus 30 is less than the release date. Anyway, different ways to say it. But we're gonna look some more at that logic here, okay? But that release date is telling us whether it's a new release. That release date being within the last 30 days tells us it's a new release. Okay, so that's your N naught. Two conditions in your N naught. The AF dot active flag equals N, and the release date is less than 30 days from today's date. Subtract those rows out, and then that will give us our 135 rows in our final result table. Okay? So, okay, Brother White, that release date calculation, what is that all about? Excuse the scrolling here while I find get to the those calculations. So this is the way Brother McLaughlin does it and explains it. How do we know whether it's a new release or an old release? We know based off of the release date, and if the release date is within the last 30 days, it's a new release, and if the release date was older than more than the last 30 days, then it's an old release. Okay? So here's where he shows you that calculation here, where trunk sys date, and we've talked about what trunk sys date means, right? Minus the trunk I release date is less than 31. Okay, there it is right there for you. So that's what I was telling you is in the end and not, okay? We're going to use this in other places in this select statement. But because we need to calculate old release versus new release a few times in this by the time we get done with this whole select statement. Okay, so here's how you know whether it's a new release. This formula right here, where today's date minus the release date is less than 31, then it's a new release. Okay, and here's another way to say it, or today's date minus 30 is less than the release date. Okay. So how do you know if it's an old release? Okay, and if it's not a new release, then it is an old release. You really only have to calculate half of this, but you could do that by saying where today's date minus the release date is greater than 30 days. Okay, if today's date minus the release date is more than 30 days, then it's an old release. Another way to say it is if today's date minus 30 days is greater than or equal to the I release date, then it's an old release. Okay. We're going to use that some more, okay? But let's look now, let's keep going with the active flag calculation, okay? You calculate whether an item has an active flag by the following formula, okay, where af.activeFlag equals y, or if a row has an inactive flag, then af.activeFlag equals n. Okay, so look right here. Here's your where not. Where not. Now, this is a little more complicated than it needs to be. You don't, where not, the active flag or inactive flag comparison, okay? So where not, af.activeFlag equals n, okay, so this isn't code right here, right? This is just, he's just telling you in words, right? Where not, af.activeFlag equals n, and sysdate, and it's a new release, right? And it's a new release where sysdate minus the release date is less than 31. Okay? That's what he's taking you through there. Okay. Take a breath, pause, because now we need to look at the select clause for this query, okay? So let me summarize this. Brother McLaughlin has given you the from clause here, everything except that and not, and we've just talked through the and not, so you should be able to do that now, right? And that is everything in the bottom half of this query. Now we need to do the top half of the query, the select clause. So let's go into that. What are we selecting? Let's go down and look at our result table again, and it tells us what we are selecting. Okay, well, we'll just start through it slowly here, okay? The item ID, these headers right here tell us this is what we're selecting, right? Because that's how these headers got here, is because they are going to be in our select clause. Select now the item ID. So in the from clause, we have now this result table. Oracle has constructed this result table of 135 rows. Now we're saying display to us these columns. The item ID, where does that come from? Well, that comes from the item table, which has an alias of I, right? So I.item ID. So we're selecting I.item ID. And then we're selecting the active flag. And where does active flag come from? Well, we've talked about active flag in the cross join, and we gave that virtual result table an alias of AF, right? So we're selecting AF.active flag. Right? We named that in our select from dual, we named that active flag, so that's AF.active flag. Now we're selecting the price type, right? And where is price type coming from? That's coming from the common lookup table, right? We joined to the common lookup table. So we've got CL dot common lookup type, and then give it a column alias as price type. We want price type to print out, but this is really the common lookup. Common lookup ID. Okay, this is the common lookup ID. CL dot the common lookup ID from the common lookup table. Common lookup ID as, and then as price type, label that column price type, okay? The next one here, what is this? This is the common lookup type name, right? The common lookup type, the character string, right? And so this is CL dot common lookup type, but the name we want here to print out is price description. So we want CL dot common lookup type as price description. Okay? Okay, pause there and get that much. Make sure you understand that much. Because what do we do now? Now we have start date. And how do we get a start date? So we're going to select start date. And we're going to select, we are going to fabricate, we're going to create the start date based on a calculation off of the release date. And end date, we're going to fabricate the end date. And how are we going to do that? We're going to fabricate the end date off of the release date, and then whether it has an N for active flag, right? If it has a Y for active flag, there is no end date. So we're calculating an end date for all those that have N, and we base that off of the release date. And then the amount, and we're fabricating that. And so how do we, so then we put in a value here of, you know, if it's an N, if it's an old release, and there's a value of N, and it's a one-day rental, it's 3. And if there's a value of N and it's a 3-day rental, it's 10. And if it's N and a 3-day and a 5-day rental, it's 15. So we're calculating this off of just off of the flag, the active flag, and the type of rental. And then the same for yes, if it's yes, based on that, and it's an old release, then, and 1 day, 3-day, 5-day, we calculate the 135. And if it's a new release, however, right, if it's a new release, then where it's a Y on the new release, then it's 3, 10, and 15. Okay? So, pause again. We need to go through, oops, scrolling all over here. Now we need to go through how do we construct, now we're in the select clause, we're building the select clause. Now how do we construct this start date, end date, and amount in our select statement? And the way we do that, we're going to use a case statement, and we're actually going to use nested case statements, and we're going to base everything off of release dates and the active flags to determine what these values are, okay, for start date, end date, and the amount. Okay. Pause, and then we'll continue. I'll continue in just a minute, okay, after my own brief pause. All right, let's finish this thing off, okay? Share my screen again. All right. So that select clause. Okay, we talked about, we get, let me go to, let me go back to here. Okay, we were going across our columns here, so we've got, what are we selecting? We're selecting the item ID, we're selecting the active flag, we're selecting the price type, the price description, and then we came across this start date, end date, and amount, and we need to fabricate those values. We need to create those values based off of the release date and this active flag over here, and using a release date and active flag, whether it's an old release or a new release, we can figure out the start date, end date, and amount. And again, I'm going to emphasize this is the start date of this price line, right, and the end date of this price line. Not the same as the release date, but we use the release date to figure out the start date, the end date, and the amount. Okay, now let's go back to my paint screen here. In my pseudocode, right, I'm constructing, what do I need to do here, right, to construct this select clause? Okay, so I have the item ID, the active flag, and then we talked about the common lookup ID as the price type, and the common lookup type as a price description. Then we came to start date. How do we calculate the start date? We have to calculate the start date, the end date, and then the amount. Okay? So this is where we use the case statement. Okay, so case is an if then else, right? So when it's a new release or it's an old release, and the well let's look at the amount here. Okay, the start date, let's just talk about logically what it is. Okay, the start date, let's go back to here. The start date is the same as the release date when it's an old release and the active flag is in. Okay, when it's an old release and the active flag is in, then the start date is the same as the release date. The start date is also the same as the release date when it's a new release. Okay, now we see that the start dates here are the 28th of May 2014. Okay, so that's when this was first run, because that was then the current date. That was then the current date. We can go and we looked at that in my item table, right? And you saw that the release date. Okay, so the start date for this price line is the same as the release date when it's a new release. Okay, so we have two things. When it's a new release, the start date is the same as the release date. And when it's an old release, and the active flag is in, then the start date is the same as the release date. Right? Okay, so this is what I draw out here in my pseudocode, okay? It's the same as the release date. When it's a new release, then the start date is the same as the release date. Or if it's an old release and the active flag is in, then it's the same as the release date. Right? And when you say then, you don't have to have any equal sign in here. You just say then. The way you do that, right? You just say then, and where is the release date? It's in the item table, right? Then I release date. Okay, so the start date is I release date when it's a new release, or it's an old release and the active flag is in. Okay. What other conditions do we have? So if we go back here, now we have one other case where the start date, so this start date, it's an old release. It's an old release, and the start date is what? It's 31 days after the release date, right? Where the active flag is yes, it's an old release and the active flag is yes, then the start date is 31 days after the release date. Okay, so we go back to our pseudocode here. Here. So back up to start date. Start date. We can just put that in an else here, right? So we don't need to name the conditions, okay? We don't need to name the conditions. So when it's not these conditions up here, then the start date is 31 days after the release date. Okay, that's all we have to do, because that takes care of all the other rows that do not match this condition. Okay, sorry about that. Then we get to the end date. Okay, and let me fix this for the end date. Okay, so let me take that out. Let me take that out. Okay, so now we're calculating end date. Let's go here and look at, when do we have an end date? Okay, when it's an old release, and the active flag is N, then the end date is 30 days after the release date. Right? We see that here. Otherwise, there is no release date. Or there is no end date. Sorry, there is no end date. Okay? So we get down to the, now I'm having scrolling problems here. But we get down to the new releases, and they don't have an end date because they don't have any rows that are in. Okay. So the only condition we need to look at for the end date is when it's an old release, the active flag is in, then the end date is 30 days after the release date. Otherwise, it's blank, right? It's null. We don't need to do anything because it's already null. Okay. So we go back, and that's our end date. When it's an old release and the active flag is N, then it's release date plus 30, and then we can just end that case statement because the others stay blank, they stay null. Okay, then we have the amount. And how do we calculate the amount? Okay, now inside of, when we're doing the amount, we have a case when it's a new release, and we also have a case when it's an old release and the active flag is N, and we also have a case when it's an old release and the active flag is yes. But that last case is everything else. So we don't need to put the conditions here, because everything that's not a new release and that it's not an old release where the active flag is in, then then that's our else. Everything else, which is an old release when an active flag is yes, then this is the value, okay? And so when it's a new release, then we have a case statement inside of that, because we have to look at when it's a one-day rental, then it's $3, and when it's a 3-day rental, it's $10, and when it's a 5-day rental, it's $15, okay? So you can construct this when with, which is dr.rentaldays equals 1, then it's $3, right? Then $10, then $15 when it's 3-day and 5-day rental, okay? And that ends that nested case statement. Then we have the case when it's an old release and the active flag is N, then, and we have the same case. Then we need to look at 1-day, 3-day, and 5-day rentals. And what is the amount? It's $1, $3, and $5, right? And then that's the end of that condition. Then we have the else, when it's an old release and the active flag is yes, then we need to also handle 1-day, 3-day, and 5-day rental and put in those values 1, 3, and $5. Oh, sorry, I gave you the wrong amounts up here. This is again 3, 10, and 15 up here, and down here it's 1, 3, and 5. Okay, and that's our amount. How we calculate and get our amount. Okay, so complete that. I've given you the pseudocode here. Complete that, and then and there are other ways to write these case statements. In the end, run it, and when your results match this query, then you have completed Lab 7. Okay? All right, going to go ahead and conclude our recording here.